All right, so you guys love to hear the latest and greatest about what's happening on Capitol Hill and how it's going to affect your small business. Today, we're going to talking about the changes, PPP changes proposed by Congress. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. We're going to get right into this with one of my friends and also a frequent host or guest on our shows here in the network, and that is Mr. Andrew Horowitz, coming to us from Horowitz and Company. Great to have you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Great shows. I love them.
Yep. All right. So, Andrew, this is listen, I went through an 800-page report last night. I email you, and thank you so much for taking a short notice on the interview. I email you and I say, oh my God, there's like so much here for small business that is going to have a trickle-down effect of where the markets are, and we're going to get into that. But I want to go through this with you on some of the very key points that's happening in the industry and what they're proposing. First of all, of the things I sent you, the bullet points, what are your thoughts in general of the proposal by the House?
Well, first of all, it's 1,800 pages, and this is on page 800 or so. So
800, yes.
Kudos for you to going and grabbing this one section and looking at some of the details. It's a lot of meat and a lot of little changes like small words, small things. It's really the opening salvo to a negotiation process, because here we're talking about another $3 trillion that's going to be spent. Yeah. I mean, that number alone should, open up your eyes and say, hey, what's going on here?
It's huge.
Because now that we already opened up the floodgates for $2.2 trillion plus another $400 billion on top of that, and $3 trillion worth of borrowing by the government to pay for the CARES Act and the things that are stimulative. Now all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a minute, let's go for another $3 trillion. So
yeah, let's get it while it's hot.
I think what's happening here is that this is the Democrats' foot forward to the negotiation process. A lot of the stuff within here is not going to make it to any kind of final cutting board. But with regard to the PPP, what is happening, I think, is that there is a desire to give back to some of the mistakes that were made for all the big companies that received money that shouldn't have, for the people that couldn't get in on that first round that were suffering for 3, 4, 5 weeks until they get that second round. I think this is trying to put a little bit of a we're sorry, and we want to make it. We want to make it up.
We're going to make it right.
Yeah, we're going to make it right. So I think that's what's happening.
All right, I got some great points here. Extension of the program from June 30 to December 31st, with December 31st as the new deadline for rehiring and forgiveness purposes. In the restaurant industry, that's going to be a big deal because they've been closed for, and in most cases, even here in Florida, we're closed until next Monday, and even then, you're going to be pretty much going in with a couple arms behind your back because you're only 25% potentially. So this is really going to kind of position them to where they can keep workers or rehire workers and still be eligible to get that forgiveness on that. You're pretty much in agree with that?
No, I totally agree, because when you look at the fact that they're not going to be able to rehire a lot of people, and then that portion of the loan is not going to be forgivable if they don't keep those payrolls up. And then a lot of restaurants I've even heard that are not going to start opening at all until at least phase 2. And then at that time, that 6-foot distancing and all that. Therefore, you're going to have less wait staff. You're going to have less back of the house. You're going to have less front of the house, and you're not going to need all those people. Therefore, we really need to get some momentum and back to normalcy in order to get that hiring again for those people to have those loans, even though they're very cheap loans, very inexpensive loans. But the whole idea was the forgiveness, right? Free, in other words, free money. And I think that's the big issue here. And moving it to December, I think is really a wise idea. I don't really understand why there was only that 8-week period for hiring back, especially due to the fact, one other thing, that in the CARES Act, they put a $600 per week a special unemployment package together without any requirements from the federal level. And that's a lot of money, and that may dissuade a lot of people from wanting to go back to work.
Especially in the blue collar sector.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Line item 2 improves loan terms from the current 2 years to a new 5-year floor to amortize the loans over a longer period. Obviously, that's going to lower the payments. But again, I think it goes back to if you can qualify or you can use this money to actually use it for employment, you're going to get that forgiveness factor. But for those companies who need it just for operating capital, this is going to push it out to a 5-year program. I think that's a great deal if this goes through, and I hope this is one that sticks with the bill for sure.
This is a great deal. I mean, the banks aren't going to like this because now they have a longer term at a very low cost factor, so that's really not good for their bottom line. And frankly, you can see the banks not really reacting well anyway in the last few weeks, and maybe some of these components of this proposed legislation are going to be more of a problem for them. But nonetheless, for anybody that's a small business, getting a really cheap loan with a 5-year deal, I mean, why not, right?
Listen, yeah. And if you look at the big companies, the gorillas in the industry, I mean, they have access to capital, low-cost capital like this. This is how they grow in many cases.
Right.
It's hard to compete with a company who's getting 1% and 2% loans out there to be able to grow their business. So that's going to be a good one. Clarifies that PPP loans cannot be calculated on compound basis, saving borrowers money over the long term. I thought that was an interesting. I didn't even realize that this had compounded basis points on it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that was just an oversight in the original bill. And usually when you do pay back loans, you're going to pay back a portion of potentially principal and interest, depending on how the loan is structured. And in a lot of cases, you may have some compounding that goes on if in fact no principal is paid back. Under these circumstances, it should be just a simple interest loan over the time of the course of the loan. So I think this is just a clarification.
Yeah. Here's some of the modifications. Carving out 25% of the existing funds on date of enactment to be specifically used for small business with 10 or fewer employees to guarantee that they're fully able to access the PPP assistance. So I take this that is there still funds available in this second round?
Well, there's who knows exactly, but
or is this part of a whole new round of PPP that's going to be out there to basically get every business on the planet some free cash?
I think that there's a lot of money coming back. There's a lot of clawbacks happening, right? A lot of companies that should not have actually gotten the money to begin with are giving money back. So that's a pool of money. It's not in the billions of dollars necessarily, but it's a pool of money, a few $100 million right off the top, not to mention all the fraud that they're going to have to claw back as well. But I think what this does is it gives the opportunity for small businesses that did not have either an existing relationship with a bank, maybe some kind of a way for them to easily get some money on hand, because it's not the easiest thing to get in line. And if you weren't in line and people rushed to get in line, there was the opportunity that you missed it. The second round seemed to have cleared it up. I have not heard anything from the SBA like we did the last time on the first round of this, that money's no longer available. Right? We haven't heard that.
Yeah.
So I think there is still money available. Hopefully there's money available because, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money, right? We're talking about
2.5 times. Yeah.
But we're talking about the incredible amount of money in the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that was given out.
Yeah.
First round was 360, another 310. So we're talking about 650-ish, 700. What's a couple $1 billion here or there, right?
Yeah.
But
that's almost the size of our entire restaurant industry.
Right. So you have, I think, the availability for people that really didn't have a lot of banking, maybe people that were small businesses that really did things like a gig economy kind of environment that didn't have a major banking relationship, that really didn't have any credit outstanding. So at least it's expanding it and giving that to those and earmarking a certain amount of funds for them.
Right. Yeah, I saw earmarking it into some of these community development financial institutions, CDFIs, minority development institutions, and also the SBA microlenders. Man, I don't know about you, but I've been getting a barrage of PPP microlenders that are coming into my email inbox today or recently, and I'm just amazed at how many microlenders are out there that are out hunting for people to get PPP loans for. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, don't forget, this is also a backdoor bailout for the banks to a degree, because there are fees that you pay. Well, we don't pay. The government's going to pay the bank to run the whole deal, to get it guaranteed by the SBA, basically to run the loan. So not only do they get the 1%, they get a fee for origination of it. And I think this is kind of a backdoor funding process for micro lenders that maybe, let's say you have a food truck that couldn't maybe necessarily get a loan from a particular, especially now, for a loan to carry them through. So maybe some of these micro lenders that were maybe a high price kind of deal came in and now can provide some kind of benefit for salons, for small businesses that need this money, that maybe never had a loan ever in the past. They just run off the cash and the cash flow they had to start the business.
Interesting. I've talked to several people that have done the EIDL loans, and they're getting 30-year terms on these things.
Yeah. So there was two parts of that EIDL. One was a grant, which started out as $10,000 per business, up to $10 billion. And once the money ran out, first come, first served, it was done. Well, they changed the rules somewhere in between the whole deal that $10,000 per business, depending on how many employees you have, up to 10 employees, $1,000 per employee. So that kind of stretched the money much further than it was originally projected. But those are emergency disaster relief funds that are available. A little bit higher, I believe, in interest cost to individuals, but very much available.
Yeah, I think 3% has been the going rate on those that I've seen. But what surprised me was the term length going out to 30 years.
Yeah,
that was pretty amazing.
Right.
And not doing compounded interest, so that was another factor. All right, extending covered loan periods from 8 to 24 weeks. So that's a huge jump, especially in the restaurant industry for our operators that are out there. Now you've got some breathing room to actually hire these people back.
Right.
Safe harbor for borrowers who cannot rehire due to the inability to rehire in the prescribed time frame. Is that kind of targeting the unemployment issue because people won't maybe not want to come back to work?
Well, it could be also looking at the what if. What if this whole situation continues and maybe there's a stay-at-home order or lockdown order that extends much further, and then what happens there is you're unable to open up. I mean, by law, you can't. And then if you can't open up, how do you hire people? So therefore, you cannot be, you get this loan, maybe you don't use it, maybe you don't hire people, but it's not necessarily your fault. So there's some kind of allowance for, ability for us to make sure that people aren't stuck. Now, if you didn't open up and you got this money and you didn't rehire, you probably shouldn't have spent that money. So you should be able to pay it back if you need to. But again, the hope of this program is to have the forgiveness. That's the whole game here.
Yep.
A tax-free, forgivable loan that you can utilize to get you through this period.
Well, this last item that I bullet pointed eliminates, this is the one I think that hits the home run to the mark, and that is eliminates the 75-25 rule on the use of loan proceeds for non-payroll expenses. That is big because now you're talking rent, other expenses, operating expenses.
Well, and that goes into the play of just tagging off of what we said a second ago. What happens if you get these loans but you don't rehire, right? So if you don't use the money for employees, well, what would you need the money for? Well, I need it for rent. I need it for air conditioning. I maybe need it for back bills, utilities, a whole host of things. So right now, the requirement is right now that 75% of the proceeds needs to be used for the benefit of payrolls. Now, that's a question. So what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that you have to have the same head count? What if an owner, a restaurateur, let's bring it back there, decides that, you know what, we can't open right now. I'm just going to pay myself a lot more salary.
Right.
I don't know if that's really fully flushed out in all this.
I think that is in the PPP guidelines is they've eliminated the owners and founders to take any kind of draws if they're not an actual employee of the company.
But I'm saying, if you are an employee, you just become an employee.
If you're an employee of the company, then it's your normal wage. You might be able to do a salary bump. Sure, yes, you could do that.
So I think what this does,
they're going to have a lot of potential fraud issues.
No question about that. But I think this eliminates some of that problem. So what this does is now it says, you don't only have to put 75% of your salary that you utilize the loan for 75% of your salary. Then you can use the other 25% for things like utilities, rents, etc. What this is saying is we're going to expand the use factor of what this can be used for, and therefore it gives a lot more breathing room for people. At least that's what it reads.
Right.
I mean, who knows? These things go into a lot of corrections, and again, I don't think a lot of things are going to be passed. This is the wish for, hope for. Man, if we can get this would be great concept.
Yeah. Well, when you read through this bill, the Heroes Bill, we'll call it, is what they're calling it.
Yep.
And if you can get to page 821 of this bill, you will find this information. We'll put a link to the bill on our website in the editorial that wraps this episode, so you can at least get to that part of it and put some bullet points up there as well. Andrew, I want to kind of bridge the gap here on the market, and because a lot of small business is driven by consumer confidence. Consumer confidence is driven by the big market players. You are the expert when it comes to these types of tracking of where the market recovery is coming from. You sent me a couple of charts. The ratios, the forward P&E ratios, I thought were very interesting, and also the PEG ratio.
Yep.
Let's talk about those and why you think the market is in an unstable position right now.
So I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you discuss the whole idea of confidence. That's everything that's behind the market move, and it deals with the economy as a whole. You think about the confidence where we are right now is, hey, we're going to be opening up. And I think unfortunately, there's a high level of confidence that this is going to all just end very quickly. We're going to open the door, we're going to get through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then voila, we're back to normal. When in fact, I do believe, I think I may have mentioned this on your show before, there's going to be a sense of a PVSD, a post-virus stress disorder. That's going to be accompanying a lot of people where you're going to figure, I don't want to touch, I don't want to hug, I don't want to get near, I'm going to wear a mask. What is my, again, just focusing on the restaurant industry, my waiter, are they healthy? Are they not healthy? They get near my food? What about the chefs in the back? A lot of people are going to be very concerned, but yet at this point of where we are right now, with the hope for a treatment, maybe a vaccine, which would be great, that would solve all of our problems, there's a little bit of euphoria going into this, and a little bit, I think the confidence is too high. So now when you look at, for example, the PE ratio on the stock. So we're talking about the stock market right now, which is a great barometer for not only consumers, but a great barometer for where things are in terms of the outlook. If you look at the PE ratio and you notice that chart, that PE ratio—
This has been sharp. This is a sharp ascent.
Amazing.
I mean, from the downturn.
Yes.
There's nothing in what goes back to 2006, other than 2008, that even shows a remote number of correction like that.
Well, what's interesting,
where's that coming from?
So what's happening is, we have a lot of stimulus into the markets. You have the Fed backstopping money markets, getting into the markets of buying directly on the open markets this week, ETFs of certain bond funds. You have all this stimulus and all that. But what's interesting about this and how this calculation comes to be is you have a 20 or so forward multiple, meaning that people are willing to pay a much higher level for outlook for the forward earnings than they have any time in history on this chart. And what's interesting is, usually when you get into a recessionary period, and I think we could all agree that, we're in a recessionary period by every single metric that we could look at. Whether or not we get out of it on a U shape, a V shape, a W shape, a square root sign, an L, whatever it is, the fact is that stocks usually bring down the multiples of what you're willing to pay because the outward growth is limited. So now you say, well, the Fed has the rates at 0%, and you have all this money coming into the markets, but usually you still mark down the multiple. And what's happened here is that people are willing to pay so much more for stocks right now on the hope that there's going to be this big recovery and everything is back to normal in 2021. When you shift over to the PEG ratio, this is even a better refined look at things. This is even more startling.
That one's out of this world.
So the PEG ratio, what it shows in this particular chart, which is just nosebleed territory, right? Which is unbelievable. So what this shows is that not only are we willing to pay more for stocks now, but we're thinking that over the 5-year period moving forward, that we're willing to pay outward that much more for stocks. And if you look at this number, it's 2.2 right now. 2.2, usually I'm going to say 1 is from what we learned in school. 1 was, hey, you're willing to pay 1 times the forward PE on a stock, and that's a reasonable level. Below that, it's a value. Above that, maybe overvalued. 1.6, when we have these very low interest rates, I'm going to say is, okay, I'll go with that if I have to. It was at 1.8 in December, and I was like, wow, that's out of control. Now we're at 2.2, meaning that people are willing to pay about 40 to 50% more for stocks than the potential value that they even estimate it's going to be valued at sometime in the next 5 years. Absurd. So I think there's unfortunately, I think we're setting ourselves up for a fall. If anything goes wrong, if, for example, we saw that LA this week said they're going to be keeping their lockdown through July. if we see a spike and a manifestation of some of this, or maybe like we saw this week that Abbott Labs are giving false negatives
Yeah.
on their recent drugs, their test that everybody was all excited about. These issues are going to weigh because we are absolutely priced for perfection right now, more than perfection.
Yeah.
We're priced for perfection plus. So I think it's a big issue.
Well, and you're dealing with even CEOs like Elon Musk, who's out there saying, "Hey, the stock is overvalued right now. It's overvalued." It's just
and it went down for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it came right back up.
And even that's a CEO claiming that everybody knows what's happening. What I don't understand is why the smart money, and I guess the smart money is probably sitting on the sidelines right now anyway. Other than some of the backfill of what you're getting from some of the Fed stimulus.
Right, I would agree.
Sure.
I mean, there's a combination. There's a lot of MOMO, which is momentum trading, that turned into FOMO, fear of missing out. There's a lot of foreign money coming in. There's a lot of stimulus that trickles down into the stock market. That's just a natural phenomenon that we see all the time. But for our portfolios, for what we're doing for our clients is, you know what? We're not getting too excited about this. We think there is another leg down. It's a traditional process in a recessionary cycle where we get the all clear too early and we feel that, you know what? Hey, everything's fine. Going to return back to normal. It happens almost every single cycle. And we're just being a little bit more, I would say, conservative in our methodologies right now, not getting ahead of ourselves. The worst comes to worst, we miss a little bit of upside. We can get back in when we want to get back in. Not that we're out, but we have a much lower exposure, and that is making our clients extremely comfortable.
Yeah, which I could see that being the case. It's going to be interesting. I definitely want to get you back on the show because I think we are going to see some market positions that are going to affect small business and that trickle-down effect into the consumer confidence, which is definitely going to affect Main Street and whether or not people are going out and spending money, because that's, at the end of the day, that's going to be what's driving the economy.
Exactly.
For sure.
If people feel comfortable with their portfolios, the wealth effect is doing well, 401ks are doing well, they feel like, hey, you know what? I'm not worried about losing my job. I'm not worried about going out. It's more than just a virus, right? It's more than just this whole health issue. It's a financial issue. And if everybody feels really good, not only are they going to go out, but they're going to spend more. They're going to go to the restaurants and take out people, buy that expensive wine, do a much greater tip. They're going to do the things that they do when they're feeling really good. When they're not feeling confident or about their future, they recoil, they pull back. And that's a really bad thing for a lot of the smaller businesses out there. So just be careful not to get ahead of yourselves. Don't put the skis out too far ahead, because we know what happens then.
Yeah, for sure. Andrew, great having you on the show today. Thanks so much for stopping in. We'll definitely get you back on.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much.
All right. All right, so all of you listening in over on the podcast side, whether you're on Spotify or maybe iTunes, make sure and leave a review. We love to get your feedback. That's the best way we get basically audience engagement that tells us what you do and don't like about the show. And this is how we learn and we improve each and every time. You can also hit me up on Twitter, just @PaulBaron. That's the best place for any ideas, or if you love something and you want us to dive in a little bit further down into the rabbit hole, that's the place to kind of communicate with me as well. Lastly, if you have an idea for a show or maybe a guest that you'd like to see on the Baron Report, shoot us an email to producer@foodabletv.com. We'll catch you next time right here on the Baron Report.